In a long-lost stream site lies one of the internet's strangest unknown personalities. As a semi-occasional viewer and a friend of the individual, he agreed to help me with this iceberg that chronicles his life. If you don't already know the YouTube iceberg trend, it's a play on the Titanic iceberg story, whereas the ship was hit by the iceberg under the water, that which could not be seen. In the context of YouTube, the top of the iceberg lists the common, mundane, or unoffensive examples in the given subject. As you get down the iceberg, things become more obscure, troubling, and the most popular aspect, scary. Part 1. The heart of this story takes place over the course of about a year on a briefly hosted and forgotten site called Gone Stream. Only a few screen caps remain, but as someone incredibly interested in a certain user's story, I started to write down his claims and befriend him over audio call. His username was Shurg. He told an incredibly detailed account of his life, so much actually that I'm almost entirely sure he is telling the truth. I will get into the meaning behind his username later in the video. His story goes something like this. When he was 4, he was the subject of a highly technological scientific experiment in which the previous memories of his life were erased. Also in this experiment, his ability to dream, imagine, have physical memory, and have an internal voice was also erased. In place of what they took away, the scientists added a series of chips in the brain that could then relay brain chemistry back to Shurg. Using the brain chemistry of the scientists, the chip could be used as a replacement for all that they took away. And using the brain chemistry of Shurg, the scientist could see, smell, think, and feel what Shurg did. Shurg lived like this from ages 5 to 19, with no direct contact to the scientists, not knowing the experiment had ever happened. These are his stories. With the first tier, we're going to go through reasonable topics in this iceberg's full scope, and common topics that will appear in more detail later down the iceberg. The most common trend in this iceberg is the analysis of chipped dreams. But for now, a chipped dream may be sectioned into 2 pieces: pre and post chip. Pre-chip dreaming, apparently being very rare, only occurring a few times a year. The only times they were more frequent was dreams being repeated in many aspects. Most of these dreams have been lost. On this tier, we will also analyze things that impacted his life from early on. These in tier 1 will be quite mundane. We will also see events that stand out from a history of 1,000 wasted days, where nothing was seemingly gained. We are going to run down some early memories that didn't affect Shurg psychologically. In later tiers, we will analyze more pressing memories. Watching basketball from the fence. On one of his first kindergarten days, instead of going to class, he spent time watching the older kids play basketball. There are 2 more kindergarten memories on this tier. One day, in the middle of class, a young kindergarten Shurg individually flushed down 64 Crayola crayons. While the motive has been lost to time, aggressiveness and anger most likely drove Shurg to do it. The reason why grade school memories are on this list is to analyze how little was learned or remembered from years of schooling. A very small number of grade school memories actually had any sort of impact. Another kindergarten memory would be learning about Native American glyphs. While no specific information remains, he guarantees that this did happen. Not having the experience of ages 0 through 5, there were many common things that Shurg had to learn later in life. On day 1 of 1st grade, Shurg claims that he learned how to sit Indian style, this technique being entirely new to him. This tier also covers a few prominent and important media throughout the pre-chip awakening. South Park had a long-lasting impact on Shurg. He watched South Park from a very young age. The style of humor connected with him, and he almost instantly became a fan of the show. Specific instances of South Park will be explored later in the iceberg. Another piece of media with multiple instances on the iceberg is the video game Monster Hunter. To put it briefly, Monster Hunter was one of the first pieces of media to explore wonder and the mind and heart of Shurg. The Monster Hunter series has one of the longest lifespans of any media according to Shurg. On this tier, there are several important pre-chip awakening social attributors. Believe it or not, Mountain Dew had a strong impact in Shurg's early life. With gathering among his friends and peers, much Mountain Dew was drank. In fact, in a single night of partying, multiple 12-packs were generally downed. This also meant experimenting with every new and upcoming Mountain Dew flavor. The next topic isn't an analysis of the hardcore impacts of taking Adderall at a young age. Instead, this topic explains simple ways of how Adderall changed a normal school day. Young Shurg believed that Adderall was a necessity for school success. He had a very hard time functioning in school without it. Adderall affected Shurg's school socially. He made it a goal to fight this every day, be as sociable and friendly as possible. Shurg would not eat breakfast or lunch because of the Adderall. Shurg would take less if he knew that his classes that day weren't going to be very difficult, but he pretty much always took it. Adderall is a theme that will be found further down the iceberg. The computer program Skype had a large impact on Shurg's social history. After Shurg moved states and went to a new high school, he used the Skype program to stay in contact with his old friends. Shurg has claimed he's been in at least 1,000 hours worth of Skype calls. He was in a Skype call almost every day after school, and almost every weekend for years. Spelling has never been Shurg's strong suit. According to Shurg, there's been thousands of spelling mistakes. Due to the chip, spelling is hard to learn. Even words he's seen and used hundreds of times, such as architecture. It's an untraceable metric, but that can still be seen in the current day. This next topic is nice and lighthearted. In social situation, video games were very commonplace. One of Shurg's common phrases was, "Okay, now I'm going to try." Shurg has stated that he believes it's a very common phrase. After a slight increase in performance after heavy focus, he said that he rarely still won. Finishing this tier will be the introduction to all post-chip topics and concepts. All post-chip topics somehow harken back to the discussion of the first chip contact, as well as the first time inner voice was heard. The first inner voice Shurg ever heard was that of movie star and WWE wrestler John Cena. It was just another normal night in the American South. While hanging out with his best friend's mom came out of the house and started yelling. Not being allowed to be on the property, Shurg ran as fast as he could to his car. His car was 5 minutes away if he ran as fast as he could. When he hit the gravel road, he started to hear an ethereal voice in his head. This being the first time anything like this had happened to him. John Cena began to offer words of encouragement about his run, telling Shurg to keep up the pace and that he was doing well. Shurg was perplexed and immediately thought that the voice was invasive. Some power that wasn't him was allowing it to happen. John Cena's voice only lasted about 30 seconds and only said a few things. We will explore this more later in the iceberg. And with that, the video is over. And in the next episodes, the topics will only get more scary and more crazy.